Let's begin. This is a formal evaluation. The subject's condition has been observed, the symptoms have been cataloged, and the pathology, well, it's been identified. We will now proceed with the clinical assessment.
So let's be perfectly clear, right from the outset. The patient is society itself. The diagnosis is an illness of consciousness. And the prognosis, without immediate and drastic intervention, is total systemic failure. It is terminal.
You have to understand, every structure, every single interaction, it's all just a symptom. That vibrant neon glow of what we call modern existence, it's just a mask. It's hiding a deep, underlying decay. We're not here to examine a living civilization. No, we're conducting an autopsy.
All right, diagnosis. We're calling this the architecture of stagnation. What our observations show is that the patient has built this incredibly elaborate reality, one that's designed to just loop back on itself endlessly. Think of it as a grand cathedral of hollow performances, and it all leads to just one place: terminal inertia.
And the primary symptom we've identified? We call it the Pharisees paradox. You see, the patient is constantly engaging in these desperate, performative rituals. They're putting on a show for what is essentially an empty, indifferent sky. And they're operating under this delusion that these outward displays can somehow fix the rot inside. Let me be clear, they can't.
So, what's the root cause of this whole fever? It comes down to one thing: the fractured ego, the very concept of a separate self. This pathological state of individuality, that is the source of all the agonizing tension. It's a fundamental deviation from the universal equilibrium, from the peace of non-being.
So the diagnosis is terminal, but an intervention is possible. We call it the methodology of unmaking. And you need to understand, this isn't some act of malice. Think of it as a necessary surgical procedure, one designed to strip away all the illusion and finally expose the core pathology for what it truly is. For this procedure, we employ two primary instruments. First, you have the ebony clock tower. Its job is to apply relentless, unbearable external pressure. It's that constant ticking reminder of your own mortality. At the exact same time, the second instrument, the verdant dragon, forces a confrontation that is entirely internal.
Now, the dragon's function is purely diagnostic. It's not an attacker, it's an internal mirror. It doesn't do anything to you, it just reflects. It forces the patient to look at every single lie they've told themselves, every failure they have systematically buried deep down inside.
And when you combine the pressure from these two instruments, well, it leads to a very precise outcome. A single moment of what can only be described as agonizing clarity. In this state, every last bit of self-deception is just shattered. The patient is finally forced to see their own rotting interior psyche with no illusions left.
So, when there's nowhere left to hide, what choice is there? This moment of clarity, that's the crucible. The architecture of stagnation has completely collapsed. All the hollow rituals have failed, and now the patient has to make a choice.
And now we arrive at the prognosis. It's all determined right here, in this final crucible. The patient is stripped of every defense, and they're presented with a choice between two very different, fundamental logics of existence.
Okay, here are the options. On one side, you have the recommended treatment, the logic of zero. This is a therapeutic release, a return to the peace of non-being, the grand silence. On the other side is the pathological choice, the logic of one. This means embracing the friction of consciousness, the endless struggle, and becoming the master of your own reality.
So what happens if the patient refuses the cure? What if they choose the logic of one? Well, they're choosing a life defined by chronic, severe symptoms. We call this the agony of sovereignty.
And these aren't temporary side effects. These are lifelong afflictions. First, there's persistent friction, a continuous, absolutely exhausting mental struggle against the void. Then, unfiltered existence. You're bearing the heavy weight of it all indefinitely with no comforts. This leads to sovereign isolation. You're liberated, sure, but you're stripped of all external validation. You're alone. With that comes a crushing responsibility, the pressure of being the sole source of authentic meaning. And finally, enduring pressure, a constant conscious awareness of mortality and the harsh reality of it all.
So the primary risk is this endless struggle. You have to fight to remain a sovereign master, instead of just falling back into being a passive stargazer. It's a fundamental choice between the comfort of manufacturing meaning from the outside and the unending internal effort it takes to truly master your own reality.
Which brings us to our final assessment. This entire intervention, this agonizing procedure, it's what we call the crimson gift. And yes, it's a paradox.
You see, while our clinical goal is a return to equilibrium, to zero, the intense pressure of the unmaking process, it can actually forge something new. So the patient is given a true choice, the grand silence of surrender, of returning to that peace, or becoming the very lightning that defines your own path.
And that's where we leave it. The final prognosis is ultimately up to the patient. The friction required for sovereignty might forge a new consciousness, but it's a state of perpetual conflict. The evaluation is complete, so the question remains, is the lightning that defines its own path worth the eternal storm?